Hi, my name is Aubrey. Thank you for watching this video. I'm going to explain a little bit about my experiment that I conducted for my master's thesis. So I would like to say thank you first to all of the participants. I had over 140 participants take the experiment. Some of them were my friends and family here, so thank you. And some of them were Italians from the University of Siena. Thank you as well. I hope that this video will be interesting, but possibly also helpful for Italians learning English, because you can learn about this very specific phenomenon that happens in informal written English. So first, we will spend some time reviewing what a subject is, what a pronoun is, and looking specifically at when and which pronouns can be dropped in this informal setting in a casual style. And then we'll take a look at the experiment and the results. So a subject is a person, place, or thing, a noun, which is kind of responsible for the action that the verb is describing. So we have Aubrie as the main subject here. And when we want to replace that main subject with something faster, faster to say, more efficient, we use a pronoun. So once someone has already established that Aubrie is the main subject here, we can go ahead and use she, because that's the pronoun that is correct for me. So in Italian, it's a little bit different. In Italian, they usually do not need to say the pronoun out loud. So it's called a null subject language. Spanish is similar. There's lots of languages that work in this way, where the information about who did the action is morphologically added on to the verb. So that information is available from the conjugation of the verb. And so we don't need to have the redundant information of saying the pronoun again. So you can see here, generally you would say ha scritto una tesi, and you don't need to say lei. Lei is the translation of she. You can leave that part out. Where in English, if you just said wrote a thesis, it might be confusing if you hadn't previously established who the person was. So as I said, this might be part of the inflection of the verb. If we look at this third example here, it's not clear who wrote the thesis. It could have been you, they, she, I. Anything would work with that verb. But it may come up that you think, I think I've seen actually a missing pronoun before in English. And why is that? Why is that the case? Why is it allowed in some places and not others? So some examples here: hope your vacation is going well, see you soon. These almost seem strange with the pronoun, because it's become so normal that we drop those pronouns. And it doesn't only apply to first person pronouns, which is something like I or we. It also seems to apply to third person pronouns like he, she, it. But it's important, as I said, that the person that we're talking about, or the thing, has already been established. So here we have he ate some escargot in France, so we already know it's he, and then maybe said he would never would again. And remember that these are also examples from written English. So they may seem a little strange when I say them out loud, but I think native speakers would agree that this seems fine. However, it doesn't work with all pronouns, as we'll see in a minute. The ones that are okay to drop are first person pronouns, I and we. These are the most commonly dropped. You can think of it like the default option is that the person who's saying the sentence is talking about themselves. We like to talk about ourselves, right? So that you can pretty much drop it anywhere. You don't need to establish that it's you that's the subject of that sentence. Whereas third person is different. Third person, we need to have heard the verb, the subject previously. So here we have it with a non-person subject. which is a branch. It's a thing, right? A branch broke off the tree last night, fell right on top of the car. In this case, we're dropping it, and it seems fine. So we can also seem to drop it when it doesn't refer to an actual thing. So something like an expletive, it rained last night, it doesn't refer to the weather or clouds. It seemed important to say. It's just there to fill the place of the subject, and it doesn't really refer to anything. So those are fine to go. We don't really need them anyway. So you can just say, seemed important to say. Second person pronouns are not okay to drop. So something like you all, you guys, all of these need to be said out loud, or else it creates some confusion. This could be because when you have an imperative sentence, so an imperative sentence is something where you're telling someone, it's like a command, you're telling someone to do something like watch out, or hold on, or eat some food. And the default pronoun for an imperative sentence is second person. So you're usually addressing someone else. It's almost impossible to think of an imperative sentence where you're commanding yourself to do something. So this could be why it's important to always specify the subject pronoun when you are saying a declarative sentence, like you will need to eat lunch first. It seems a bit strange. That star means that it's not okay. It seems a bit strange to drop the you here. Okay, when can subject pronouns be dropped? So a subject pronoun drop is totally fine in the root position, which is on the far left here, right before the verb. I don't think that I can come, fine. However, dropped pronouns in an embedded clause do not appear to be okay. So these are part of the results that we got from the experiment as well. It's what we expected, but we confirmed them. So you can't say, I don't think that can come. And you also can't say, don't think that can come. That sounds a bit weird. So anything that's within an embedded clause will usually be introduced by that or which, something like that. Also, you can drop a full contraction. So something like I have is a contraction of I and have, or I'll. That's fine to drop the whole thing as well. So the reason that this experiment is interesting is because we can look at something that's register-based, which means it only occurs within a specific sub-environments of the language. So it's a register that is only used in appropriate settings. It's not standard English. So the rules that you're taught in school when you're learning English as a second language learner, especially one that comes from a null subject language like Italian, you usually learn that you always need a pronoun in English. You always need to say it out loud. So this explicit information that you're getting from your teacher is fine, and you will never be incorrect if you say the pronoun. It's fine to do so. But you may notice that some people, when you speak with native speakers, you may notice that they are leaving off some pronouns. And if you're interested in doing the same thing, if you want to try to use this informal style, now you know the rules. You know, no embedded, no second person. Those are the most important things. But this experiment is interesting because we see the influence, and we can see the pressure and influence from these two different sources. One of the sources is the Italian, most likely Italian professors, or maybe there's some native English professors who are telling you, remember, always say the pronoun. So we have some weight from that, and then we also have some weight from all of the experience that people have with English. So if they're using social media, if they're speaking with native speakers, in video games online, whatever it is, they may have noticed that the pronoun was missing in a lot of situations, or they may not have noticed. They may have seen it, but it was unconscious. So they didn't realize that their brain was keeping track, that their brain was paying attention to all of these times, but it was. which is very, very cool that your brain is paying attention for you. You don't need to be so conscious to kind of have intuitions about these things. Also, it's very important that your brain is able to comprehend the structure. So under the universal grammar theory, or the generativist theories, we have a certain grammar, which is actually the how do I explain, the process, the procedure that parses, that comprehends the syntax of the sentence. So we have maybe an English grammar and an Italian grammar, and first we're using the Italian grammar to try to understand English, and we're getting some failures. Things are not set up in the same way. The syntax is different, but we start to grow this English grammar, which can successfully parse, which can successfully comprehend these sentences. So that's another place that we're getting some pressure from in our brain when we're reading a sentence, whether or not it can actually be, meaning can be extracted from the way that the syntax is set up. So we're looking at these two pressures, and we're trying to find out which is more important, which has more influence. So the aims of the experiment first were to verify that the restrictions that I said before were actually correct. These restrictions were found from some corpora of published diaries, nonfiction diaries, which were studied very carefully. And these patterns were found, that there was never embedded, there was no second person. But just because it wasn't there doesn't mean necessarily that it's wrong. So we want some information from an experiment like this to verify that it is indeed unacceptable for native English speakers. So we did that. And secondly, I wanted to find out whether Italian native speakers would be able to notice when it was less acceptable to drop the pronoun, so like in embedded clauses, as I said. And thirdly, I wanted to see if there was any difference between Italians who had a higher level of competence compared with lower level, if there was any progression. If you didn't take the experiment, this is what it looked like. There was a screenshot of a conversation happening, a fictitious conversation, and within that conversation somewhere, there was a subject pronoun drop, which participants may have noticed, maybe not. Either way, maybe they had a certain feeling or intuition about the conversation, whether something seemed strange about it, and then they were asked to choose 1 to 7 on the scale here to rate that conversation overall. I know that the instructions were a little bit vague and maybe confusing to some people, but it was very important to provide the minimum instructions from me so that I don't influence the way that you perceive the experiment. I didn't want to introduce any biases or any bias into the approach that you were taking. So I didn't say, look at the grammar. I didn't say, look at the punctuation or think about the content of the conversation. I tried to leave it very, very vague so that we could have the most natural responses from people. So this type of experiment is called an acceptability judgment. And as I said, we were interested in seeing whether or not people noticed it and if there were any patterns or trends to the level of acceptability that people assigned each conversation. And also you may have noticed if you took the experiment that there were some filler items. So these are distractors, which have different types of mistakes happening, and some of them had no mistakes. And these are mainly just to help distract you from the aim of the experiment so that you don't notice everything had a subject pronoun drop. I know you may have still noticed that was the most common mistake, but hopefully it kept you engaged so that you didn't just say, Ah, I see. There's no subject pronoun. Incorrect, 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 always. You had to, think about each conversation as its own individual, with its own individual characteristics, and you could maybe notice the difference between the embedded and the root, for example. Okay, so what were the results? Well, firstly, the results from the native English speakers showed, it verified that what we thought about the type of drops allowed was correct. So not too much to say here, but that's good. Secondly, we wanted to see how Italians would react in comparison with native English speakers. So this is the Italian group as a whole. And we found that overall, Italians were able to distinguish at least that the embedded drop, which is the one that's circled here, condition D, was unacceptable and much more unacceptable than the rest of the drops, which is great. It's great news. And we also see that the Italians were not applying a singular rule to every type of pronoun drop. Every time that they saw a pronoun drop, they didn't say, oh, that's incorrect. 7, 7, 7, or I'm sorry, 1, 1, 1. Bad, bad, bad. No. The whole, across all types of drops. We didn't see that. That's great. They had a little bit of sensitivity to the different types. So, they saw a root drop and said, I think it's okay. That's condition B here. You can see that they were like, maybe you're not supposed to drop there, but it's not so terrible. Whereas, in D, obviously that was the worst. And in H, we have the second person. So that was also they were a little unsure about it, but overall they still thought probably shouldn't do that. The conditions A, C, E, and G are the conditions where everything was normal. So we had, a root subject that was pronounced, or it was overt, it was there. And then in C, we had, the same embedded sentences, which had the pronoun there, so there was nothing wrong with them. So that way we can check to make sure that the type of sentence itself is not a problem. So this is exactly what we want to see. We want to see every other one saying, yes, overall, it's above the line, it's overall okay, and overall not okay for these 3 drops that we expected to be unacceptable, which is embedded. F is a preposed adjunct. I didn't get into it, but that's another type of drop that is not all the way on that left edge of the sentence. And then H is the second person drops. So as a note, I did not have enough participants to do a statistically significant analysis for this question for number 3. So these are just, it's interesting, but it's not statistically significant. But we can see here that the low versus the high group does show some progression. So it appears in most cases that the high competence Italian speakers are progressing towards a native-like competence. They're progressing towards having native-like judgments or intuitions about this, which is fantastic. It's incredible if you think that Italians have had, the Italian participants have had fewer opportunities to interact with this type of English, since it's this informal written English. As I said, it's not part of their normal courses. They still were able to over time start to progress towards a native speaker like understanding of the phenomenon, and that's the same for almost all of these. We see something a little strange happening with B, but I won't get into that too much. But it might be that the higher competence Italians are over applying the rule a little bit. But overall, these were great results. So in summary, Italians do seem to be sensitive to the difference here between the embedded and the root level drops. And it does appear that people are able to progress with respect to this topic. So that's very exciting because if you asked a native English speaker to explain this phenomenon to you, to say, I know you can drop a subject sometimes. Can you tell me when I cannot do it and when I can do it? I don't think that we would be able to do this. We wouldn't be able to explain it. It's very abstract. It doesn't really follow any logical rules. Uh, there's not a good way to remember why it's this way. So that makes it a very challenging thing to have learned. And the fact that Italians, without ever being told this explicitly, were able to um, pick up on this difference is very exciting for anyone who wants to learn a language, even as an adult, right? So all of these Italians were adults, they were all over 18, and it shows that even adults can continue to progress and get better at their second language, which is very exciting. So thank you so much for watching this, and feel free to contact me if you had any questions or you want to know more about this. This is a fun word cloud I did with all of the most common words in my thesis. And yeah, you can see that we talked a lot about pronouns and English and Italian, of course. So anyway, thanks so much for watching, and see you all soon, I hope.